Hello everyone, welcome back to YK Reviews. For today's video, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the video game Detroit Become Human. So let's get into it. So with Detroit Become Human, this is essentially following three androids on three separate storylines to break free from the mold and become independent and become free essentially from their human counterparts basically. And this, as you can see, is the PS4 version. I believe it's a PlayStation exclusive. I remember trying to check on the Xbox and it's not on there, so I think this is like a PS exclusive here. But let's get into this review, discuss the plot, the characters, what I thought about it in general here. So as I mentioned earlier, there's three androids that you're following. So we'll start off with we'll go step by step for each android essentially. So the first android is the one that kicks off basically the storyline, and the android is called Connor. And basically with Connor, he's sort of a police android. He's working with the police department. You start off with the storyline where he's a hostage negotiator trying to negotiate with an android who has taken a little girl captive basically on a rooftop. So this is essentially kicking off the game. The storyline progresses. You have to pick and choose your answers as you negotiate essentially. So then fast forward, his storyline is basically he has to follow a police officer, a police detective named Hank, and Hank hates androids, and he's basically having to work with Connor, the android police officer, to basically just resolve a crime essentially. But what I like with this storyline is that I like the bond and the banter between the two of them. You have Hank making snide comments, you have Connor making like the one-liners basically. So they had a great interaction with one another. You had a great chemistry as it builds up throughout the game itself. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. What was more interesting as well is that like throughout this particular storyline, you have Connor having to educate Hank essentially on like androids and their behavior, because they're chasing up these deviant androids who are essentially faulty androids basically gone rogue. And I won't get into like any specific spoilers or anything like that, but I liked where the storyline went and like what Hank had to do, what Connor had to do, like basically their choices that they pick. Because this game in particular, you pick certain elements in the storyline and that progresses the story further for you, and it goes in completely different directions. And so what I enjoyed about it is as the storyline progresses, as they get deeper into like the plot, you really see the bond that they start building, and I really love the interactions that comes between them, because you get to pick like throughout the storyline, throughout each of these androids, you get to pick which one of the answers you want to pick, and whatever answer you go for, that determines how the story goes. And so I really like the aspect of the game for each one, because every time you play it, you can pick a different answer and the storyline will go a different way. For Connor and Hank, I think that storyline is probably my favorite storyline because of where it takes Connor and where it takes Hank. So this is probably my favorite one. My second favorite plot line, and the one I enjoy as well because of like this one you get the most choices to pick, the one with Marcus. So essentially Marcus starts off as like an android who is like sort of like a butler to this person, and I'll be honest, the first couple of like things that you can do with a controller and like the choices you pick were kind of like lame, and it was kind of like boring choices to pick because of like where he starts off. But eventually once like the story does pick up, and once you start going towards the direction that the game wants you to go with, it really does start picking up, and his storyline, like it really intensifies. He's like, what happens with him and like what choices you pick for him really dictate how the game goes and like what happens towards the end. So with Marcus's storyline, it really is an enjoyable storyline, and what he has to go through because of like what the human race is doing to androids essentially. So he's kind of like the centerpiece of it all. So I really enjoyed what they do with Marcus in this game, and what they make you pick and the choices you have to do in each section once a particular scene happens in the game. The choices you have to pick from then moving forward towards the end of the game, I really loved what they did with that. And then you've got the third android. The third android, Kara, is basically a caretaker, and she is looking after like a father with a little girl. The crap hits the fan basically, and so she has to basically save the little girl from the father, and so her storyline is essentially like running away from that and then getting into things that a little kid shouldn't have to be involved in overall. So I loved what they did with that, but for me, I think this is like my least favorite storyline because of what they have to do, because it's sort of like a really slow build up for that particular storyline to get to like where they need to be towards the end of the game. So for me, it felt just like it kind of like dragged on, and kind of like would rather play Connor or Marcus's storyline, those two in particular, compared to like Kara's storyline. Because if you've played the game, or if you will play the game, you'll understand like it's sort of like a slow dragging build up and to get to where they need to be basically. But overall, like towards like the end of the game, everything like all ties in together, and what comes out of it, because you still have to make choices, you still have to make decisions on like what each specific character has to do, and I loved that aspect of it. I really enjoyed the plot and the storyline of androids and the human race and all of that stuff, because it essentially takes place in like 2038. 2038 it shows in the back cover here. But I really enjoyed like what they did with that storyline, and like how everything plays out, and like what decisions you make affect everybody, not just like the android race essentially, but what it does to affect the human race. So I really love that aspect of it. However, my criticisms for the game itself is that it sort of was very short. Like the plot was very short, and I get that like the decisions I made caused the storyline to be a lot quicker. Maybe so, because I've played it like twice, and both times the storylines were a little bit short. But it's similar to basically Spider-Man Miles Morales in terms of like the length of the plot itself. You finish it very quickly, and as I was mentioning in Marcus's plot towards the beginning, like some of the things that you do with the controller, like for example, and this isn't really like a spoiler or anything like that, but like one particular part of the game, you use the touchpad basically of a controller to make a painting, essentially draw a painting, and it was kind of like those boring aspects of it where I wish there was more things you could do in terms of like the controller and that kind of stuff, instead of just doing like mundane activities on that aspect. But in terms of like the gameplay and the visuals, I thought it looked very stunning. Like the imagery of the characters looked so fantastic that I have to give a huge shout out to the people behind the team, behind the game developers. They did a fantastic job in terms of the visuals, in terms of the scenery. Like Detroit itself looked amazing, and the characters looked so realistic, it was crazy. So that is one aspect that I really enjoyed itself. Overall, in terms of the game itself, would I recommend it? I would, yes, because it is a very fun game to play. You will have a good time with it, especially if you love those types of games where you can make choices, and that choice determines what happens in the storyline. You'll love this game because it really has some fantastic choices and some fantastic storylines to progress. So this is one I would definitely recommend, and I really enjoyed this game in particular. I think you'll love the plot, you'll definitely love the visuals, and you'll love the gameplay itself. This one, I think, if you have the PS4 or even try it on the PS5 too, you'll definitely love this game. Like I mentioned earlier on in the review, I think it is only on PlayStation. I don't think it's for Xbox, so I think it is a PS exclusive. So if you have a PlayStation, definitely give this game a try. I think you'll definitely enjoy this game. But this is my take and this is my thoughts on Detroit Become Human. If you've played the game, let me know down in the comment section what you thought about it. If you haven't, let me know if you would potentially try it. Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like button, hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any videos here. I post reviews on movies, shows and video games such as this one, so hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future videos here. But thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for listening here. This is YK Reviews. Peace.